Hello there, and welcome to this German GCSE and iGCSE video tutorial. This particular video tutorial looks at translation and translation in both directions too, so from English to German and German to English. We're going to cover both of them here. These can be trickier parts of the GCSE, and plenty of students will have to do these, so there should be lots of value here. Just to introduce myself first, I'm Dhananjay Talwar, and I studied modern languages, myself, French and Italian specifically, for my MA degree at the University of Cambridge. I graduated from there in 2015, and I've been a tutor for most of the time since, and an educator throughout that time after university. I've been a full-time tutor for more than 6 years, and I am really passionate about languages and language learning. I've learned more than 20 languages to different levels, and at least 9 of those to fluency, of which German is naturally one. It's something I really enjoy doing and a real hobby of mine. And likewise, I enjoy motivating my students, giving them the tools to succeed in language learning themselves and to reach their language learning goals, like getting their target grade in GCSE exams. Thus far, I've helped over 500 different students to achieve or even exceed their target grade in GCSE or iGCSE exams for different languages while I've been a tutor. I've taught 8 languages to GCSE or iGCSE level so far, and several of those at higher levels as well. It's been a very enjoyable journey and one that I look forward to continuing on. Okay, just to recap, these are the German GCSE and iGCSE exam boards. So you should be familiar with your own exam board, ideally, and be aware of the format and the syllabus for your particular exam board. Try and tailor your preparation to that exam board so that you're not just generically studying GCSE or iGCSE German material, but you're preparing yourself as best as possible for your exam. And these 4 exam boards in bold here, so all the GCSE German exam boards effectively, are the ones who do have translation as part of their GCSE or iGCSE exams currently, as of November 2025. So do carry on watching if you're taking any of those 4 exam boards. If you are studying iGCSE German, then fortunately or unfortunately, translation is not going to be a part of your exam. But of course, these things are subject to change always. So I recommend keeping up to date with the latest developments and any changes from exam board to exam board, such as by consulting the website of your exam board. Okay, we're going to kick off by looking at translation from German to English, and then take a look at English to German. So out of the two, of course, translating from German to English is easier, generally thought of as easier by the vast majority of students compared to translating from English to German. I did an MA in translation interpreting as well. Translating out of your mother tongue is always going to be harder than translating into your mother tongue or your stronger language. For most students, English will be stronger language compared to German. Most students sitting these exams, so the translation from German to English is going to be easier. If you do have to do translation from German to English, then that would usually be the last question that comes up in your reading paper. So it's going to be part of the reading exam. Of course, this is less challenging, as mentioned, than translating from English to German. And the translation would normally consist of a few sentences. Most of the time it is one, say, solid paragraph, a mini paragraph, just a few, about 4 or 5 lines maximum, but it can consist of individual sentences instead. That depends on your exam board and also depends on if you're doing foundation tier or higher tier. Within those sentences, of course, there can be some topic-specific vocabulary. That is to be expected, whether you're translating German to English or English to German. So don't forget to revise topic-specific vocabulary and try to cover all of the topic areas when you revise your vocab too, so that you're not caught out if it's a harder topic that comes up or a weaker one for you in the translation sections. Okay, these are my best tips for translating from German into English. One of the keys to translation is to not translate word for word. German is a Germanic language, of course, so is English, so they're in the same language family, German and English, along with other languages like Dutch, the Scandinavian and Nordic languages, and more. So there are some similarities between German and English. Certain words, hand is a hand, for example, in German. Arm is an arm, and so on. So, certain vocabulary is the same. And there is overlap in the structures too, but there's certainly crucial differences, and that's why you cannot translate word for word. If you do translate just one word at a time, you're going to end up with very strange and unnatural sounding sentences. And that's actually the thing to prioritize when you're translating. You have to convey the sense of the original accurately. And that's the sense of the original. The message of the original text has to be conveyed accurately by any translation rather than translating one word at a time. You can rephrase the original German slightly if it makes your final version in English make more sense. As mentioned, German and English do not map 100% in terms of their structures. There's definitely quite a few differences there, as we'll see later on. So you can rephrase the original German slightly again. The aim is to capture the meaning of the original and not to translate word for word in any way. So try to show the examiner clearly that you've understood the original. For GCSE, this tends to be more important than it does if you're translating outside of these exams. But here you do want to show the examiner that you've understood the original German, because that is the part that is likely to be more testing, of course. The students are very likely to be able to write in and produce good or fluent English. So sometimes at GCSE level, if you do want to use words that are slightly closer to the original German text, just to show the examiner that you've understood it clearly, then you can, potentially. It is important to signal to the examiner as much as you can that you've understood what the original text is saying. Make sure you've accounted for each word in the original. That doesn't mean it's not about translating word for word. What that means is don't miss out words that are there in the original. If there are extra words, you have to make sure that you account for them in some way. So you have to convey their meaning. And there may be words which do not directly add any meaning into the English. But if there are, small words like very, really, quite, and so on, those sorts of mini details which are very easy to forget or to overlook, you have to include in your English translation as well. If you miss out even those small words, you could be penalized. You would be penalized. Be careful about tenses and common differences between German and English. We'll explore those in more detail later on here. There are quite a few of those. There are common pitfalls, though. So the more you practice translating both German to English and English to German, the more you'll know how to get around those common difficulties and understand where there are clear differences between German and English and where they actually quite nicely overlap. If you don't know a word in the original German text, try and work it out from context. That's a very useful skill in general anyway, for say you're reading and listening papers too. Try and use the words around it, that's the context, to help you to work out what that particular German word could mean. As it's German, there will often be compound words, so there may be hidden inside that word another German word which you do recognize. That can really help. And another thing to think through is whether you know any similar looking words in other languages, whether that's in English, Dutch, which is very similar to German and English too, say Swedish, Norwegian, etc., or potentially any other language. And that could help you possibly to understand what that word means, though not always. Check your work thoroughly. That's extremely important. Even more so when you're translating into German, but do make sure when you check through your own English translation that you haven't made any small mistakes, silly mistakes, and that you haven't left out any information that's there in the original text. Okay, now I'm going to give you one quick example. So there we go. This is from an AQA paper from 2023. And yeah, you can see the question written out here. Your Austrian friend sends you an email message, translate this message into English. So this is something like what the original text could look like, although now I believe AQA has split it into different individual sentences for their translation section. You can see the original German text there. Mein älterer Bruder studiert seit 2 Jahren Geschichte, and so on. And you can see my ideal translation or model translation below. So I'll give you a bit of time to read through that, the German original text and the English translation below in red. And I'll just point out some features, things that I was careful to do while translating this. So, of course, the most important thing is to capture the the meaning of the original text. And as mentioned, English and German can convey things, the same ideas, quite differently. So you've got to be aware of that and move away from the original German when it's necessary. For example, that first sentence in German, mein älterer Bruder studiert seit 2 Jahren Geschichte, literally translates as something like, my older brother studies since 2 years history. Obviously, firstly, that word order sounds extremely strange in English, and there's other key differences. In English, we wouldn't say he studies history since 2 years. You would change the tense completely to he has been studying history for 2 years. And you'd also use the preposition for instead of since in English. So I've been careful to make all those changes because that's definitely important. And I wouldn't hesitate to go away from the original German. Like a preposition like since, you might be tempted to stick with that because that's what it says in the German, but it doesn't make so much sense in English. You should really change it to the preposition for instead. Where there are differences between the two languages, that's of course where the translation is usually harder. Things like word order, that's something to really look out for when translating between German and English. And many things which are just one word in German, like Altenheim, are very difficult, if not impossible, to capture in one word in English. So I put that as a retirement home, for example. Other than that, I've just focused on conveying the sense of the original. Yeah, and it's important that the final version in English here makes good sense as well. Yeah, so wir verstehen uns gut, for example, means, we get along well. Literally, it means we understand each other good, or we understand each other well. But of course, if you translate it too literally, as mentioned, or word for word, that is going to sound really, really odd in English. Okay, so those are the things to watch out for. Okay, now we move on to translating from English into German. So if this comes up for your exam, if you have to do translation from English to German for your GCSE paper, that would be usually the last question in the writing exam. Along with the writing task that you've got to do, there should also be a translation from English to German for the exam boards shown before. This is naturally quite a bit more challenging for most students than going from German into English. For obvious reasons, writing in German is harder. It's not going to be as natural or for these students because English is going to be their stronger language, perhaps their mother tongue. And German has many rules as well regarding things like word order, endings, the case system, and so on. And all of that you do have to be careful of when you're translating into German or writing in German in any way. So for that reason, writing in German, including translating from English to German, is likely going to take more practice than, say, translation into French or Spanish for most students. So I would give it due attention and make sure to practice, put in that time before the actual exam or before the weeks ahead of the exam, and that can really reap benefits. Don't leave it to the last minute. Definitely make sure that you do practice, especially writing in German, because in my experience, students find it very tricky to remember all of the rules in the language. Again, the translation from English to German would only be a few sentences. Sometimes there'll be individual sentences on the page. Often there'll be a full chunk or paragraph, which can and normally do contain some topic-specific vocabulary, pertaining to the topic that's relevant there. Okay, here are my top tips for translating from English to German. Some of these are similar to before when you're translating German to English. Definitely do not translate word for word. You'll end up producing a really stilted and odd sounding translation. And again, you do have to make it sound as natural as possible in German. That is tricky, but the nature of these texts that you have to translate, they should be fairly basic or relatively simple. They're not going to ask you to require you to use very complex grammatical structures, for instance. You can rephrase the original English slightly. Again, the most important is you convey all of the information and all the meaning of the original text from English to German. The final version makes good sense and sounds good in German. So you can rephrase the original English slightly. You don't have to stick exactly to what that English says. As we'll see, it's likely to be more natural to perhaps rephrase things slightly when you're translating into German. Make sure you've accounted for each word in the original. Basically, that means don't leave out anything. Don't leave out any information that's there in the original English text. There may be words in English that you wouldn't naturally put into German, but they don't necessarily add to the sentence in German. But the important thing is to capture all the meaning and all the information that's there in the original. So don't leave out any small bits. Be careful about tenses and common differences. There are many of those between English and German, as we'll see. And if you don't know a word, of course, that's much more likely to happen in German. So you're much more likely to understand the full English text, but be unsure of how to put that into German, perhaps for specific words. If you're writing in German, you should try and use a synonym or an approximate synonym or rephrase that in some way. Again, the most important thing is conveying the meaning and all the meaning and information that was there in the original. So even if you do have to rephrase it or use an approximate synonym, something that doesn't exactly mean the same thing but is kind of there, you can certainly get credit. You might well not be penalized for that. Make sure to check your work thoroughly. Even more important whenever you write in German, and particularly for small mistakes, but also every time that you write in German or translate into German, you must check through for spelling, punctuation, and grammar. So make sure to give yourself enough time for checking as well, and to account for that in terms of the time that you give yourself for these translation tasks. Okay, now there is an example. So this is translating from English to German. This example is from Pearson at Excel from 2023. The original text is given here. I'm always hardworking and honest, and so on. And the translation or model translation is just below in red. So you can look over this. You'll see there's quite a few small differences here and there. Sometimes German and English will map out very, very similarly, such as in the first sentence, Ich bin immer fleißig und ehrlich. In German, that basically translates, that's a word-for-word translation from the original English. So their word-for-word translation works. The two languages have basically the same structures, a way of phrasing that kind of a sentence. Other times it doesn't. For example, on Saturday afternoon, you wouldn't use the word on there in German. So that would just become Samstagnachmittags. So you have to be careful of those differences and don't be tempted to just copy the original English. stick with what would make sense and be more accurate and correct in German in the final version, the final language instead. Again, things like I earn money, the verb would have to go in the second position in German, so that becomes verdiene ich Geld instead. So literally earn I money. Yeah, for some of these words like Geschäft, perhaps Problem, quite a few others, jobs. There's possible synonyms as well. So there are a few different options to use. Things you'd really have to watch out for in German, especially, are say the case system. So verbs like helfen, to help, take the dative case. That's why it's mein Chef hilft mir manchmal. My manager, my boss, often helps or sometimes helps me. Yeah, you wouldn't say hilft mich, for example. You'd use the dative case instead of the accusative, and changes in word order too. So, wenn ich ein Problem habe, for example, wenn is a verb kicker, so it kicks the verb habe to the end of the clause or sentence. Yeah, compound tenses like the perfect tense here, haben followed by gesprochen, those can be harder. Gesprochen is a slightly irregular form. So yeah, be careful with those. And yeah, the grammar in particular is the thing to really pay attention to translating into German. Okay, as promised, we're going to look at some of the differences here between English and German. They are two languages within the same language family, not just Indo-European, but specifically Germanic languages. But there are key differences between them, and that's why translating between the two languages can definitely be tricky. These are the common traps, or some of them. German, of course, has a case system. So every time you're translating into German, make sure you remember the case system and make sure you're aware that you have to think of that whenever you're writing nouns, adjectives, pronouns, and so on in German. For instance, in English, we'd say, I see the man. But in German, the man there, which is the direct object of the sentence, the person being seen, rather than doing the seeing, that would go in the accusative. Yeah, so you see a den man. If the man was seeing somebody else or something else, that would be in the nominative case instead, der Mann. So these differences, yeah, make German grammar more complex than English, and it's really important to be aware of them. German has gender and agreement, of course. English doesn't. German has three different genders, masculine, feminine, and neuter. Yeah, so for example, if you were to say a red house in English, the word red, the adjective red, does not have to agree with the word house or the noun house in any way, whereas in German it does. So because house is neuter gender, in German, you'd say ein rotes Haus. Yeah, rotes goes into, the adjective goes into the neuter singular nominative form. So again, something definitely to remember when translating. German uses the word for the, which is formally called the definite article, a lot more than English, or quite a bit more than English, even in more general statements. For example, in English, we'd say something like, freedom is important, not the freedom is important. That would be wrong in English. But in German, you would include the word for the over there. So you would say, die Freiheit ist wichtig. Literally, the freedom is important. You wouldn't say, Freiheit ist wichtig. So that is another important difference between the two languages. And something to note when you're translating, you may have to add in the definite article if you're going into German. German and English can have quite different word orders. Yeah, German doesn't have a progressive or continuous tense at all. So whereas in English, you could say something like, although I'm going to the cinema today, in German, I am going and I go are exactly the same form, ich gehe. Yeah, and yeah, so those are different tenses. Also, the word order changes. So you wouldn't say, I'm going to the cinema today. Literally in German here, obwohl ich heute ins Kino gehe, is although I today into the cinema go, or I'm going. So the word order is very different in German, and German does have quite fixed word order rules, plenty of those. So definitely the word order is likely to change when you're translating between these languages. German can have long compound nouns, whereas English can, but definitely doesn't to the same extent. One example is a hospital administration system. You'd never have to translate anything like that for GCSE. This is just to illustrate the nature of compound nouns in German, which is three separate words in English. But in German, that would just be mashed together into one massive word, Krankenhausverwaltungssystem. And you see this happen a lot in German. German is known for this. They can have much longer nouns as well, which is basically just compounding one noun after another. Okay. But yeah, do be aware of that. It can be a bit easier because you could mash nouns together in German, but you can't in English. So obviously don't do that in your English translation. And of course, there are many false friends between German and English. One of those, a really famous example, is the word gift in German, which actually means poison in English, not a present or a gift. I'm sure there are many memes and jokes made about that. But watch out for false friends because they are commonly confused. Okay, now I am going to test your understanding of translation from English to German and German to English with this mini quiz. Okay, question one is, why is translating word for word generally a bad idea? So we know it definitely is. I'm just asking for the reason why. Okay, let me show the answer. So English and German, of course, express the same concepts very differently. So translating one word at a time usually does not work well at all. It produces very strange translations and inaccurate ones. Number two is true or false. English uses compound nouns more than in German, or more than German does. Okay, time to show the answer for that. This is definitely false. German actually uses compound nouns a fair bit more than English. Compound nouns is where you add a noun onto another noun and so on. German is very much known for that. Question three then, true or false again. In German, adjectives always have to agree with the noun that they are describing. In number, singular, plural, gender, masculine, feminine, or neuter, and case, nominative, accusative, genitive, or dative. Give a few more seconds for this. Okay, let me reveal the answer. This is actually false. In German, the adjective has to agree with the noun it describes if they're next to that noun, if they're placed next to that noun. But if they're separated by a verb at all, then there doesn't have to be agreement. The adjective, well, there wouldn't be agreement. The adjective would simply go in its nominative masculine singular form. For example, you'd say, das Haus ist rot, but the house is red, but ein rotes Haus, yeah, a red house. Okay, question four. What should you do if you're translating from English to German and can't remember a particular word in German? Okay, let me show this. So the best thing is to try and express that same idea in a different way, for instance, using a synonym or paraphrasing slightly. And you can often get away with this if it's still grammatically accurate in German and you convey the information that was originally there in the original text. Okay, if you've got questions about anything mentioned in here, or if you'd like to inquire about lessons and more personalized help, which I do as well, you can get in touch with me by email, through Facebook or Instagram. I post on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn pretty much every day. I talk about my passion for languages, hopefully motivate people to learn more languages and give them tools to make that enjoyable, and very fun as well. And I do post about exams, including GCSEs too. Things like how to create revision plans, how to prepare as well as you can, and more. So do follow me on those platforms. I have many free resources available, including for German GCSE, and ones that will be useful and that you can access for free if you get in touch. And I do one-to-one lessons, group classes, courses, and plenty more. So do reach out if you want to find out about any of those things.